we want to start off with authenticity and the power of knowing our history. We just saw that amazing video that you put together, and that was just one of many that you've done. Let's talk about the fact that you've built your platform, a powerful platform, by leaning into your strength, communicating, or one of your strengths, communicating history in a way that resonates. How did you discover that that was one of your superpowers? And what advice would you give students who are still trying to figure out what they're good at or what lights them up?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So I did not discover it was my superpower until I did it for the first time. So I'll tell you the story of the first TikTok that I ever made. This first TikTok actually went viral. So within about 4 hours, it had over 1 million views. And I posted it on Martin Luther King Jr. Day in 2021. The reason that I posted it on MLK Day is because I was scrolling through Twitter or Instagram that day, and I saw a post from the FBI's Twitter account. The FBI Twitter account had posted Happy MLK Day. And it was funny to me because a few months before, I was taking a history class from one of my professors who actually had done a lot of research on the history of the FBI. And she had written an article in the New York Times about the FBI had tried to convince Martin Luther King Jr. to commit suicide in order to stop his activism. So I made a video that same day after seeing that tweet about how it was ironic that you rarely will ever acknowledge or see the FBI acknowledge or any American government institution acknowledge this history, but instead participate in the celebration of these people today without reckoning with how they, in the past and current day, are squashing activists through their different quote-unquote counterterrorism measures. So I made an article about this program called COINTELPRO, which was the targeting of black activists in the 1960s, and that was specifically used against Martin Luther King Jr., and that went viral. And I realized that people really lean in and wanted to hear stories about our government and our country that they had never learned about before, because it would give them more of a perspective on how to, ideally in the future, work to make the country better, right? Nowadays, we're seeing all of that come back again. We're seeing activists getting disappeared and people being detained for their opinions. And it goes to show that learning this history back before it started is how people are resisting today. So that's how I learned that people have an appetite for this and that they can create a change.
That is amazing. It's such a powerful start and beginning for you. So you show up online with such authenticity and grace. What advice would you give to students about staying true to themselves on social media as they pursue their careers? And then as a follow-up to that, how can understanding one's history, which you spend a lot of time in, help students better understand themselves?
Yeah, so I'll start with the first one about maintaining authenticity online. If anyone has an interest in being a creator or even doing your own thing, but having content creation be a way of marketing and branding yourself, it's going to be really important to be super intentional about what you put online. So there was, I think it was, I'm not sure what influencer it was, but it was someone really popular on YouTube, like probably one of the Paul brothers or something. And at one point they were asked, what % of the real you shows up on social media? And I believe they said something around like 30 to 40%. And there's 60% of their life that they would never show on social media, 60% of their interactions, of their close friends and family that the world will never see, and it's that 40% that they're putting forward. So I always resonate with that because I don't use social media as a place to vent out my frustrations about like interpersonal conflict or family drama. Instead, I'm very intentional about using it to promote my brand, to share educational history lessons, and to use it as a way to move up in the direction that I want my career to go. So the first thing is to be very intentional. It's almost a little bit inauthentic in a way, but perhaps not inauthentic, but curated is the right word. You have to be curated on social media. And the second thing I would say is always try to consume content, consume information, and use it as a jumping off point for yourself. So there's a book called Steal Like an Artist, and it talks about how the best artists, whether they're musical or visual artists, have so many inspirations, and they take what works for them and discard what doesn't work. So that would be the second thing that I would say. And then when it comes to history, once again, the old adage is that maybe history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. You have to know the past to fix the future. And I think all these cliches are very accurate. But if I had to put it in my own words, I think that there's so many situations in the world that may feel new, or so many issues facing us, whether it be the attacks on DEI and Black history happening in our classrooms, whether it be just the general hardships of growing up in a generation where there was a pandemic and social media is driving loneliness. All those things maybe not have exactly happened in the past because there might not have been social media, but there have been huge pandemics that have caused social decay. There have been rollbacks of civil rights in the past. And I think when you're aware of what happened before and the figures who helped fight against it and resist, there is something that you can take away from it in your own life and in your own activism.
That is amazing. And such great tips about branding authenticity. And so as we kind of move a little further into the branding conversation, we're looking at social media platforms, right? TikTok wasn't around 10 years ago. But in 2021, you launched a TikTok, your channel, before the platform became what it is today. That could be considered a leap. And there's real value in taking leaps. Now that you're creating content for National Geographic and reaching people across the world, can you share with the students in the room who may be on the edge, right? Whether it's launching their own project, starting their social media account, what gave you the courage to start before you had everything figured out?
Yeah, and to even color why that might be even seen more as a leap. So I actually, I started my TikTok account my senior year of college. At that time, I already had a full-time offer for a job, a very good job after graduation, but it wasn't something that I loved doing. It was kind of a soulless opportunity. So I asked them, actually, I just went on a dime and tried to ask them, oh, can I like postpone my start date for this job by about 1 or 2 years or even a few months just so I can like see how this social media career works out, because I mean like YouTube creators had always existed, so I knew there was some format that could work. And they said no. So I, in turn, said no to them. So I turned down a stable, high-paying job to jump full-time into content creation. By that time, I had not ever been paid for a brand deal. There was no way, at least up until that point, there was no way in what I was doing carrying me forward. I had to like believe in my ability to innovate and to do even more and accelerate the amount of attention that I was getting. But at the end of the day, I think for me, it was all about following that passion, because I knew that if I was at a job where I had to work like 12-hour days or 10-hour days, and I was just like mad and sad the entire time, then I wouldn't even be productive. But if I put that same energy into something that I loved, I would probably work for even more time. And that investment would be in myself as opposed to someone else's company or someone else's project. So for me, taking the leap was all about believing in myself, knowing that if I have a passion, that I would work hard towards it, and just being very smart and strategic about what steps will I take to make this something viable, to make it something that can be long-lasting. So I just steered all of that passion, all of that energy into a game plan and followed it to the best of my ability, and now I'm here, so I guess it worked out.
Yes, absolutely. And you talked about that game plan, right? So I know helping run the UNCF national social media accounts can sometimes, social media can be daunting. And for the students in the room that are looking at trying to go on social media, but it just feels a little bit overwhelming and they don't necessarily have a game plan right now, what would you say are some of the first practical steps they can take to make that leap?
Yeah, so the first very practical step that you can do is, as I said earlier, like make a list of the accounts or the influencers or the creators that you really resonate and that you would probably try to create content like, because that's like always the best first step, is to sort of study the greats, if you will. And then once you have that, I would then plan and like literally write down what about each form of content do you really like or do you enjoy? What works in their hook? What works in the body of their storytelling? Or if it's not something related to like my content, if they're doing dance, like what songs are going viral, like what hashtags, just really study the people who are there before you. The way that I did this is I actually really love conspiracies and just like crazy alien theories and all types of stuff like that. Conspiracies about the government, I mean, I love it all. A lot of times that stuff is just completely fake and false, but at the end of the day, the way that they tell stories is inherently engaging. Like if someone starts talking about like some UFO abduction, like I will lean in and want to hear the whole thing, or some true crime, like murder mystery, like I'm leaning in the entire time. So I thought, okay, that's why I'm gonna model my storytelling in itself. Like that's how it starts. Like, did you know that the government stole 200 brains in an attempt to prove that white people are a superior race? Like all these things maybe sound like conspiracies because I frame them that way, But then where I add in my own sort of credibility is that I studied history in college. When you work with Nat Geo, anyone here who has ever done that knows they triple fact check everything, so it has to be real. So I stole the model of a conspiracy theory and the best conspiracy theorists online, and then injected it with real history and real information, so I have that educational sort of tinge to it. So the best thing you could do is just study the people before you, and then when you finally make that leap to create, which is, there's no good advice, you just gotta do it, repeat and reuse what works from other people's in your own work, and then over time, you'll create more and more of a unique style.
Amazing, amazing. And I'm sure you all are grateful for those tips, right? Amazing. So we're going to take a quick shift here into leadership, right? We're at the Student Leadership Conference. Yeah. Each of these students are leaders in their own right. And while you're known as the Gen Z historian, you've also made history yourself, becoming Yale's first Black student body president. That's a powerful legacy to carry. Yes, yes. What did that chapter teach you about leadership, using your voice, and creating space for others?
Yeah, well, I guess number one, leadership is very hard. Very difficult, especially in the position that I was in. So I was actually student body president from 2019 to 2020. So this was both during the pandemic as well as the murder of George Floyd. So on the pandemic front, it was a lot of logistical challenges. What happened at Yale specifically is that we were on spring break, expecting fully to return to campus, but then we were told we cannot come back, everyone has to go home. So imagine you have like a diamond ring that you just like left on your cabinet thinking you would come back, or all your clothes, everyone's clothes are there, all your books, your textbooks, your laptop, and for a year you can't access any of that. The first thing you're gonna do is get your parents, your really annoying parents, to then email the student government to try to like see what's happening. But of course we're in the dark because there's a whole pandemic happening, and then the administrations figure things out. So that was like the real logistical challenge. And then the challenge around like maybe society and activism and like identity was related to George Floyd, of course. And when he was murdered, it brought up so many conversations about the history of Yale. And I actually penned my first ever op-ed. So my first ever foray into being a public intellectual happened when I was student body president. And I wrote how people celebrated my presidency as a win, but I didn't want the fact that I was the first Black student body president to overshadow all of the both contemporary and historical issues with race that our university has. So Elihu Yale, who the school is named after, was a slave trader. Enslaved Africans built up the university. One of the Yale University alumni was the inventor of the cotton gin, which was a huge driver of the slave trade back in the South. So and let alone everything that happens thereafter with like the civil rights and Jim Crow, and all the crazy people from Yale right now who are in office doing things. I won't say any names. This is all to say that when it comes to leadership, there's oftentimes like these challenges, whether something unexpected like a pandemic in the middle of the school year or a murder that sparks so many racial justice conversations. And in those moments, you have to really seize those opportunities to carry a message forward that aligns with your values. And you just have to like dive first into it. So I would say leadership is really, in my opinion, if I had to associate with one word, it's all about adaptation. So that's probably the biggest thing that I learned about it.
That's amazing. And I think, too, as we talk about social media, a lot of times we see a lot of wins on social media, people and their accomplishments, but we don't always see the behind the curtain of leadership, which is often failure. Oh, yeah. Part of being a leader is, some would say, is learning to fail fast. And so could you share maybe a moment, I know you shared a couple of challenges, but maybe a moment where you failed at something or had a challenge in some way, and how you were able to shift and adapt and come back?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, the first time I ever actually the first time I joined a campaign at Yale was when I was a freshman. And one of the older classmen, who was my very close friend, invited me to work on his campaign and to be one of the leaders of it. And the thing about Yale is that the student government campaigns are super, super, super competitive. There's like John F. Kennedy's grandson was there, I think like shortly before I even came into the school. So it's like politicians' kids who like really want it, grew up very entitled to things, I guess is one way to put it. So it was a very hard and difficult thing. And I was like, I poured my heart and soul into it, like missed class for him, and just did everything that I could to try to like make sure that we won. And I felt very personally like responsible for a lot of the ideas. Like one of them was creating like a nice music video in order to advertise his policies. And like when we posted that video, initially got like really good feedback, and then people were saying, oh, it's not taking this seriously enough, and this is like a bad idea. So then the guy is looking at me like, oh, this was your idea, so we're all kind of like fighting, and it was a whole thing. And then he ended up losing, so that was not great. And then I realized like, okay, like I had so many bad ideas. I feel like I like messed this up. Maybe student government is not for me. Maybe it's not worth it. And another thing that I realized also is that there was so much that I didn't know about this world, right? Because the other candidates, they were like really on top of their debate strategies. They were really on top of like their policy knowledge. And I felt like such imposter syndrome, like coming into this opportunity, into this school and not having any of like the skills to win a student government election, but the skills to kind of make one fail, at least is what it felt like. But in terms of resilience, after that, I didn't quit, I didn't give up. I actually applied for a position underneath the person who had beat my candidate and tried to convince her that even though like I didn't have all the skills back then, I was willing to learn. I brought forward my own policies that I proposed before, and they really liked those ideas, and they actually invited me to join the executive board as the finance director, so like the head of business, the head of like the money. And then like a quick aside is that right before this happened, there was a huge scandal where the student government had used tuition money from other students to buy themselves Patagonia jackets. So like that was like the background context. So to tie it all together, as finance director, I was not only just joining student government in this high position, but I was also in charge of cleaning up the entire image of student government and coming with a new financial system to then move forward so that no scandals like that would happen again. Luckily, we were scandal-free. No one embezzled any more money. But yeah, so like that was how I adapted, by just realizing that, okay, even though I might not have the skill sets, even though I might have let someone down, and like that feeling of guilt was very strong, I still wanted to push through and still pursue the thing that I wanted, because failure is common, and it's all about what you learn from it.
That is amazing. Yes. Like I said, gems, a lot of gems, a lot of gems. So as we get ready to wrap up, we're talking about your network being your net worth. Let's talk about how do you build a network, and what value does that bring to things like your social media platforms and building a brand? What tips would you give to students who are trying to build their network?
Yeah, so I think to build a network, I mean, I'd say the very practical advice is like, it's really important to practice like your social skills, to put it very bluntly. So, I mean, I've had points in my life where I was like very introverted, very awkward, and I would say the good thing about my college experience is that there were so many opportunities and times where I had to interact with a lot of people that I think I got better at it over time. But skill set is so important when it comes to network building, speaking, writing, educating yourself on a lot of topics, like reading books, reading articles. Because I'll say for me, the best way that I'm able to connect with people is just from knowing so much and talking to so many people and having a library of knowledge, where if someone says, oh, like, I'm from Sweden, and you meet them at an event, and you can talk about Sweden, and you could like maybe see something from the news that might interest them, or just say you want to go there and say you've maybe been somewhere close, or you're interested in the culture. I think just like having all these interactions with other people by forcing yourself into social situations and building your social skills is the #1 way to start acquiring that network. And I would say the second thing, after like just trying to be your best attempts at being a social butterfly where you can, the second thing is going to be to always follow up with people, because it's very easy to make that first connection, but the people who will remember you are the people who you reach out to more than once. So whether it's very specifically, you create like a chart of the people in your life who you want to stay connected to professionally and personally, and then always try to reach out maybe once a quarter or once every few months. If you have to do that, then do that. Or if it's just like you're maybe more spontaneous, you just want to like ping people every once in a while, I would say build up your social skills, put yourself in tough situations, you have to meet new people and acquire that skill set, read a lot, learn a lot to be interesting in these situations. And then secondary to that, when you finally create like that that initial network, make sure to follow up with people and keep them in mind.
Amazing. So I just want to say thank you so much for all of the gems that you have just given to all of the students here. As we close here tonight, I know you've already shared so much and given so many amazing tips. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you would like to share with our students tonight?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just really important that you all realize that you are young and that there is a lot to learn. So don't stop learning. Don't stop putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. I will say there's going to be times in your life, especially for me, I think the feeling that I most look back on as something positive now that I felt was negative at the time is that feeling of like fear of a new opportunity, especially like the fear of competition, whether it be running for student government or trying to get a job or going for a position in the leadership, when you feel like there's other people there who can just like crush you, who just have everything together, who are like better at it, whatever the case might be. In those moments, just believe in yourself and go for it. And the worst case is that you go up against other people or a challenge and you lose, but at the end of the day, you're getting better. And the best case is that you win or you do something that makes history and you go on from there. So there's really a win-win situation when you put yourself out there in the really challenging situations and never turn down or turn back from a challenge.
Wow, icing on the cake, icing on the cake. Thank you so much, Kahlil, again, for the tips that you shared on authenticity, history, and branding. We're so thankful that you could join us here tonight. Make time in your busy schedule. Let's give him another round of applause.